While most economists would say inflation will go down between now and the election, a majority of Americans either believe inflation will stay the same or actually get worse leading up to the election. So kind of the perception of inflation is almost worse than the actual price growth itself. And that's terrible news for Biden because incumbent presidents are typically seen as responsible for the economy, whether it's good or bad. And right now, inflation is overshadowing every other metric with the economy.
Welcome to Reporter's Notebook, where we talk to the Washington Examiner's top journalists about the stories breaking on their beats. I'm Jim Antle, and I'm joined today by economics reporter Zach Halaschak. Zach, you've written a piece on the magazine looking at how inflation is going to be an important issue in this year's presidential election. Talk a little bit about what's at stake and why this particularly matters to President Biden.
Yeah, inflation is the number one issue with voters right now heading in. We're now 6 months until Election Day. That's kind of an interesting benchmark because at this point it's kind of hard. Many people have already set their minds on who they're going to vote for, on their perceptions of the economy, on their perceptions of their well-being. And so inflation being such a big issue, right now, it hasn't really been going down the past few months. So that's going to be a critical issue heading into the election. I think it's something like 70% of voters in a recent poll said that they believe the economy is headed in the wrong direction. And, while most economists would say inflation will go down between now and the election, a majority of Americans either believe inflation will stay the same or actually get worse leading up to the election. So kind of the perception of inflation is almost worse than the actual price growth itself. And that's terrible news for Biden because incumbent presidents are typically seen as responsible for the economy, whether it's good or bad. And right now, inflation is overshadowing every other metric with the economy.
Right, and that's kind of important because the Biden team has really tried to emphasize a lot of the metrics that are more positive. Economic growth, low unemployment, the number of jobs being created. But inflation and then also high interest rates to combat inflation seem to really be where people's minds are focused when they are talking about the state of the economy.
Yeah, I mean, it's really a 1-2 punch, like you said, with both the higher interest rates and the higher inflation. The higher interest rates are being undertaken to fight the higher inflation. So the fact that inflation hasn't really fallen to that manageable 2% range that the Fed's looking for is really not good because people are spending more when they go to the grocery store. They're spending more when they buy a car with auto loans because their interest rates are higher. Housing is more unaffordable because mortgage rates have soared because of the Fed's rate hikes. So, I mean, really, it's just a difficult situation for consumers, and they might express their anger about the situation at the ballot box, which is certainly a concern for Biden. And then in Team Trump and Team Republican, they're using that as a cudgel to attack Democrats and Biden as being bad stewards of the economy and making the vote a referendum on their paychecks, basically, in their pocketbooks.
So if Trump and the Republicans are successful in doing that, then inflation does become their problem. So that there are some divisions on the Trump team over how exactly to handle that. And you've written about this.
Yeah, so my colleague and I, Joe Lawler, we wrote a story looking at how there's kind of this internal tension in Trump world, if you will, and the informal advisors that are, Trump right now is still not the Republican nominee, but he's pretty much poised to be. So he's meeting with dozens of advisors on all issues, that would be pertinent to the election and to the White House should he win. And so there's these economic advisors that are already kind of plotting moves to do should he take power. And one of the more influential ones is named as Robert Lighthizer. He was the U.S. trade representative under Trump. He's a big protectionist, so kind of not really cut from the conservative free market orthodoxy.
But a big priority of the Trump administration, both in the past and potentially in the future.
Yes, it's prioritizing, closing the trade deficit, making U.S. manufacturing more viable on the global stage. And so Lighthizer kind of been discussing with his allies this idea of purposely or artificially devaluing the U.S. dollar, which has never really been undertaken and would be a hugely drastic change from Fed policy, Treasury policy. It will require, a lot of things to change in the Trump administration. But And speaking to some of his other former president's other economic advisors, like Steve Moore, who's the Heritage Foundation and leads up the Alliance to Unleash Prosperity.
And a more orthodox free market guy.
Very much so, supply-sider, orthodox free markets. He's pushing back on that. So I gave him a call and we talked about it, and he was like, yeah, I know that that Lighthizer been pushing that, but I don't agree with that. A strong dollar is good for the U.S. overall. And so you're going to get these kind of divisions within Trump, like, you'll have one person on one shoulder and the other on the other, kind of whispering in either ear, trying to get Trump to move in that direction. So it's really just, as we know with Trump, he, at the end of the day, is the one who kind of makes the decisions here.
Right.
So it's going to come down to, we'll see, basically. It's a wait and see thing.
More or less bang for more or less bucks. Thank you, Zach.
That's right. Yeah.
You can read Zach and the rest of our policy team's coverage at washingtonexaminer.com.